Good morning. It's so early here today, but I went to bed really early yesterday. I got a bunch of sun. Oh my gosh, I wonder if you can see that. Yeah, oh my goodness, look at that. Um but yeah, I went to bed so early last night and woke up wicked early this morning, so I thought I'd get some reading in before I go serve the masses breakfast. So we're going to attempt to get through this last chapter. I work at 7:15 and I have 2 hours to get through this last chapter of The Waking Dream: Unlocking the Symbolic Language of Our Lives by Ray Grasse. And chapter 12 is entitled Symbolism and Synchronicity in the New Millennium. So let's show you this picture. Oh, wait, yeah, I have to go like that and like that. Boop. That's good. Okie dokie. Symbolism and synchronicity in the new millennium. Everything in this world has a hidden meaning. Men, animals, trees, stars, they are all hieroglyphics. When you see them, you do not understand them. You think they are really men, animals, trees, stars. It is only later that you understand. And that's by Nikos Kazantzakis. Oh Lord. Zorba the Greek, from Zorba the Greek. Nikos Kazantzakis. Well, it's Kazantzakis. In these chapters, we've explored the symbolist perspective from a number of angles, using a variety of lenses. Now let us summarize the essential ideas, this time employing a slightly different framework of classification. In its fundamental sense, the symbolist worldview includes 4 interrelated ideas, and this is what's entitled 1. So 1, or like this is all 1, but now I'm getting into another 1. Excuse me. Central to this perspective is a cosmology, or view of the universe. This view considers that the world possesses an innate symbolic dimension, and that ordinary physical reality is part of a multi-leveled order, with all manifest forms reflecting subtle patterns of consciousness. From this core belief arises a series of secondary principles, including correspondence, contagion, condensation, it's not that big of a word. Cyclicity, yeah. Compensation, conception, polarity, karma, and telos, or purpose. 2. The symbolist perspective also comprises the collected wisdom of humanity encoded with such disciplines as astrology, numerology, sacred geometry, the chakras, the I Ching, the Kabbalah, and the tarot. Each of these systems is a language by which people have attempted to understand the world and the forces of destiny. For this reason, these methods can be studied not only for their divinatory insights, but for the intuitive philosophical truths they contain. 3. At its most practical, the symbolist perspective includes the theory and techniques of ritual. Through ritual, humankind has tried to manipulate nature's symbolic dynamics, whether toward external and material ends, thaumaturgy, or internal and spiritual ends, theurgy. Under this category is also included all traditional knowledge concerning the practice of divination and magic. 4. At root, the symbolist perspective necessitates a unique mode of thinking, an epistemology, or way of knowing. Rather than reasoning in facts, the symbolist engages the language of the soul through symbols and metaphors. Without metaphoric thinking, all phenomena would be perceived as flat, literal forms. We also saw how each of these four aspects of symbolist thought can be applied on the personal level, in the life of individuals, collectively, in the events and activities of societies, and universally in the forms of nature and the laws of geometry and mathematics. In this book, we have focused our attention largely on the simplest view as applied to the personal level of experience. With this foundation, we turn in conclusion to the relationship between the symbolist worldview and several contemporary models of reality. First, we consider Carl Jung's theory of synchronicity, which shares both similarities and differences with the symbolist view presented here. Then we look at the ambivalent relationship between symbolist ideas and contemporary science. We close with a brief discussion of what the symbolist worldview has to offer us today. Symbolist thought and Jung's synchronicity. In 1952, Swiss psychologist Carl Jung published Synchronicity, an acausal connecting principle, one of the most controversial works of his career. In this short volume, Jung summarized decades of research and reflection on the subject of coincidence, concluding that such phenomena hold important secrets about the deeper nature of reality and the human place within it. Citing a widely known case from his files, Jung described the time he had been working in therapy with a female client who had become blocked in response to the work they were doing. Concerned over this standstill, Jung wondered what it would take to break through her resistance. One day, the woman was describing an unusual dream involving a scarab beetle. I have a scarab beetle right here. A scarab beetle. When Jung noticed the sound of tapping coming from the room's window. Looking more closely, Jung discovered a beetle trying to get into the room. Jung caught the beetle, the closest equivalent to the scarab found in those latitudes, and handed it to the woman, saying, "Here is your scarab." Surprised by the timing of the event in relation to her present discussion, the woman was able to break through her resistance to the therapy. The joining of these seemingly unconnected events occurred at a moment which proved to be of great significance in the woman's life, and therefore, Jung felt, could justifiably be called a meaningful coincidence or synchronicity. The timing of such events seemed to Jung to provide important messages concerning the compensatory relationship between the outer world and the unconscious psyche. Jung also believed that such coincidences reflected an archetypal foundation, since they seem to arise in conjunction with key transitions in people's lives, such as changes in career, falling in love, marriage, divorce, death, illness, or spiritual transformation. In the case of his blocked patient, Jung pointed out that in ancient Egypt, the scarab was associated with rebirth. Thus, the beetle at the window suggested a potential rebirth in the life of the woman who was discussing beetles at the moment it appeared. In the same way, Jung said, synchronistic events often serve as vehicles through which meaningful archetypes express themselves in our lives. More broadly, Jung felt that synchronistic events suggested the existence of a law of nature which differed markedly from conventional principles of causality. Whereas classical physics explained phenomena largely in terms of linear chains of cause and effect, synchronistic events seemed connected without a physical causal relationship. The appearance of the beetle at the window, at the woman's dream, were in no way caused by one another. Let me try. The appearance of the beetle at the window and the woman's dream were in no way caused by one another, but appeared to arise simultaneously out of an underlying pattern of meaning of which the events were mutual expressions. The conviction led Jung and many theorists in his wake to suggest the presence of an all-encompassing acausality which exists at right angles to ordinary cause and effect. and which serves not only to connect external phenomena, but to unite the outer and inner worlds of experience, giving rise to the uh, unus mundus, or one world, described in antiquity. Unus? Unus? Maybe? Ooh, my nose is a little stuffed up this morning. In many respects, Jung's theory represents a modern resurrection of traditional symbolist principles, a fact Jung himself acknowledged in his primary essay on the subject. In discussing the roots of synchronistic thought, Jung offered a brief survey of the historical precedents for his theory, ranging from the medieval theory of correspondences to the ancient Greek notion of sympathia. As Jung noted, although the notion of casually connected events may seem strange to us now, it would have seemed commonplace in pre-scientific times. Despite obvious similarities, how do Jung's theory of synchronicity and the symbolist view really compare? As as explanatory models of as explanatory models of reality, I would suggest that there are several important differences. Let us look at three of these. The first concerns what Jung and his followers considered to be the relative infrequency of synchronistic phenomena. While there is reason to suspect that Jung may have privately entertained a more comprehensive view, he formally professed the opinion that synchronistic events were relatively rare. Jung took great pains to distinguish meaningful coincidences from more conventional ones, which could be dismissed as chance groupings without deeper significance. To Jung, the truly synchronistic event is frequently characterized by a confluence of events so startling that their chance concurrence would represent a degree of improbability that would have to be expressed by an astronomical number. In the symbolist perspective, by contrast, coincidence is the visible aspect of a more pervasive framework of design which undergirds all experiences. Taking the broader view, the circumstances of an entire life comprise a rich tapestry of meaningful connections, both outer and inner. The events of our lives are connected by an intricate chain of linked analogies involving the body, events, actions, dreams, and even the contents of our daily imagination. The occasional and dramatic coincidence in an individual's life, what is called in Chapter 1 a literal correspondence, is simply a particularly obvious cross connection between separate events or states of mind. Quote, "The whole world is an omen and a sign. Why look so wistfully in the corner?" End quote, Emerson asked. And then, quote again, "The voice of divination resounds everywhere and runs to waste unheard, unregarded, as the mountains echo with the bleatings of cattle." End quote. Oh my. The esoteric perspective further holds that symbolism and synchronistic connections extend far beyond personal experience to include the collective and universal levels of reality. On any one of these three levels, one can find important symbolic messages which are not necessarily entwined within readily obvious coincidences. Hey, Pearl, welcome in. Good morning. It's so early here. A second and equally important distinction between let's try that sentence again. A second and equally important distinction between symbolist philosophy and Jung's synchronicity theory lies in their understanding of timing. Jung saw synchronistic phenomena as essentially unpredictable. In a sense, one could no more predict when a synchronicity might occur than foretell what a person might dream on a given night. Indeed, Jung believed that if one could somehow predict coincidences, they would reflect the operation of causal processes and would thus no longer be synchronistic or a causal. Psychologist Ira Progoff, 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 a former student of Jung's, echoes this view decisively. Archetypes cannot be predicted in evidence with respect to the spontaneous events of life. That was a quote. Symbolist systems like astrology, however, offer a model in which the events and phenomena in our lives are recognized to be unfolding according to a regular set of cycles and rhythms. Even Jung's rare, meaningful coincidences can be said to occur in accordance with these cycles. So that even though one can loosely work times a coincidence is likely to occur and what general archetypal qualities will accompany it. It is ironic that Jung held astrology in high regard, yet did not appropriate these implications for his own model. It is ironic. I mean, I guess not really. It's like public versus private almost. Where do they meld? The traditional symbolist perspective offers a further modification to synchronicity theory, specifically with regards to its emphasis upon the element of simultaneity. Whereas Jung's predecessor in this field, Paul Kramer, ER, placed a greater emphasis on sequential coincidences, hence his term seriality. Jung focused his attention primarily on acausal connections involving a simultaneous link between events or states taking place in the same moment of time. Jung wrote, quote, "The synchronicity principle asserts that the terms of a meaningful coincidence are connected by simultaneity and meaning." End quote. At the same time, Jung was aware that his time-based model could not adequately account for the full range of events which might be termed synchronistic, as in the case of a person who sees an omen pointing toward an event which occurs in the future, or who dreams of an event which occurs shortly afterward. Awesome. Yeah. Afterward. Isn't that the last word there it is. Jung himself summed up this problem. Quote, "Synchronicity, a term for which I am to blame, is an unsatisfactory expression insofar as it only takes account of time phenomena." End quote. In the final analysis, Jung concluded that synchronicities could sometimes involve events that weren't exactly synchronous, but which were still related by meaning. Jung's attempts at clarification did not prevent students of his theory from identifying it almost exclusively with the idea of simultaneity. The complications this posed were most apparent in the field of astrology, since many astrologers had come to believe that Jung's theory represented the most likely explanation for astrologers' mechanism. However, as we have seen, researchers like Miguel Gauquelin demonstrated that astrological connections are not based on a grand simultaneity, since his statistics suggest a correlation between the moment of a scientist's birth and the perceived location of Saturn, rather than the planet's actual location in space. You know that book I have that's all about the archetypes in astrology in each sign? It's like it's heavily influenced by Jung. Which I can say that I'm thankful that I've learned a lot about what Carl Jung learned and espoused and taught and all of that. But the more I read The Women Who Run with the Wolves, like, I totally agree that, you know, he had like really, he had thoughts, which I mean, right, I have felt this way even about my own self before, but thoughts about, they didn't have any, him and his family, they had very cutting thoughts about people who had larger body types, and they just thought that they were like lazy, and they didn't give any room for differences in people's the and then different natures of different anatomy types and ancestral backgrounds and body types. And it also cut down a lot of the way women were in Jung's research and theories. They didn't. So thank goodness he existed, and thank goodness the knowledge kept on keeping on, right? Because there's more than just that. And I mean, I guess I'm bringing it up too because I know that it's still a big influence on the way a lot of people learn and think, and it's good to learn and think those things, right? There's more though. Yeah. Ooh, I should light the candle. Yeah, that's a good way to say it. It's a tight view. Okay, a lighter. Here's one. And then I'll flip this guy too. Boop. Jung's attempts at clarification did not prevent students of his theory from... Oh, did I read that whole thing? Grand simultaneity. I'm not sure. So Jung's attempts at clarification did not prevent students of his theory from identifying it almost exclusively with the idea of simultaneity. The complications this posed were more apparent in the field of astrology. I did read all of this. It's the location of Saturn rather than the planet's actual location in space. Yet once we jettison simultaneity as the defining mark of synchronicity and adopt instead a broader approach which incorporates both simultaneous and sequential acausal connections, such as is implied by the symbolist perspective, such paradoxes and problems disappear. Moreover, the symbolist viewpoint allows for the phenomenological possibility that each person may be connected to the universe on several levels at once. Recall our earlier example of the Crab Nebula Nova, which occurred 6,000 years ago, yet didn't appear to human observers until AD 1054 because of the time needed for the light from the image to travel across space to Earth. I suggested that humans might be connected to events of this sort at both stages of the process. Subliminally, at the moment the event occurred, and more consciously when it became visible millennia later. In short, the dynamics of meaning in each person's life are complex ones, involving several different types of relationship operating simultaneously. Excuse me. Without in any way diminishing the pivotal role Jung's theory of synchronicity has played in calling attention to the study of coincidence, which he felt to be philosophically of the greatest importance, a closer examination of his theory reveals limitations that can be helpful to bear in mind in developing a more comprehensive understanding. For one thing, since Jung's theory focused on isolated coincidences, it lacks the wide scope necessary to appreciate the pervasiveness of symbol patterns in our lives. Imagine, by way of analogy, an oceanographer who sets out to study the Pacific by analyzing the properties of only the visible waves on its surface. After decades of collecting data, the oceanographer would be no closer to comprehending the richness of the vast world below, with its multi-layered currents, its countless life forms living in intricate symbiosis, the varied landscape of the ocean floor, not to mention the properties and composition of seawater itself. In a comparable way, trying to understand synchronicity by focusing on isolated coincidences, or even on the idea of acausality, limits one to comprehending only the most obvious features of the greater ocean of meaning that encompasses the archetypal structures and dynamics of consciousness itself. And the mode of consciousness used to perceive events may itself be the key to this broader conception. As we have seen, symbolist epistemology requires and encourages a shift of perception, which makes it possible to perceive the metaphoric levels of phenomena. Thinking in terms of concrete facts or literal qualities allows one to see only the most obvious coincidences in daily life, such as the uncanny recurrence of an obscure name several times over the course of a day, or a book falling from the store shelf and opening to the page. My cat must have just woke up. An opening to the page containing the answer to a problem with which one has been struggling. My sister just brought that up. The Book of Answers. I told her you can do it with any book. Such connections are indeed unusual, but once the shift towards recognizing metaphoric nuances takes place, suddenly, like donning night vision glasses in a darkened countryside, a new world of subtleties, cross connections, and archetypal subtexts reveal itself to consciousness. In this new world, all events of everyday life are meaningful, not just its remarkable coincidences. I just got this flash of there was this movie, Richard Gere, Deborah Messing. No. Oh, and the Mothman Prophecies. Yeah, Laura Linney. Oh my gosh, that movie gave me the creeps when I was younger. It came out maybe senior year. Anyways, when you look into something, it looks back into you. You don't have to be creeped out, even though I learned that from that movie. It's true, though. You start knowing about a thing, and all of a sudden, it's all there presented for you. But once it becomes a part of your, like if it's not a part of your awareness beforehand, it's not going to be something that's going to be presented to you. It's not a part of something that you're creating. So yeah, it is cool how that works. It's like reading a book, and thereafter, you're different for the rest of your life. And like others who have read that book, they're on that page with you too. It's cool. Ancient wisdom, modern science. We turn now to another contemporary model of reality. Oh wait, I'll have to. I wanted to say one more thing. Plus the shamans that couldn't see the ships on the shore. No. The Native American people who couldn't see the ships out at the ocean, but the shaman who could. And then as soon as he kept telling the people about it, they finally were able to see it. Okay, moving on. Ancient wisdom, modern science. We turn now to another contemporary model of reality with possible connections to symbolist thinking. As we saw earlier, the decline of the symbolist worldview occurred in tandem with the advent of modern science in the 17th century. In recent decades, however, a series of important scientific theories have emerged which bear striking resemblance to key symbolist principles. Some writers have even gone as far to suggest that science may be on the verge of explaining traditional symbolist notions, as well as Jung's theory of synchronicity. We looked in Chapter 9 at the problems inherent in applying Bell's theorem to the workings of astrology. Here, I focus on three other contemporary scientific theories which are often employed in discussions of the mechanism underlying symbolistic connections. The holographic principle, fractal geometry, and Rupert Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance. Each of these, in its own way, invites provocative comparison with aspects of symbolist thought. Ooh, because it is a holographic universe. The Seed. It's about an African woman who reincarnated thousands of times. Sounds juicy. Thank you. And now I'm glad that this is like saved in our chat too. Thank you. The holographic principle. It's where we live, this holographic world. Among the many developments that resulted from the discovery of laser technology was the advent of holography, ho- holography, 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 or three-dimensional photography, holograph, holography. Perhaps the most compelling feature of this new medium was the unique way that the fragment of a holographic image appeared to contain the whole image. If one tears off a piece of a conventional photographic print, the piece contains only a portion of the complete image. However, an entire holograph can be resurrected from a portion of a holographic image, although in diminished resolution. Since its discovery, researchers in many fields have used this principle to model or explain a wide range of phenomena, from the deeper workings of the brain, Carl Pribram, to the characteristics of space itself, David Bohm. The holographic principle can be likened to the symbolist notion of condensation, which holds that a part can reflect a larger whole. We have seen numerous examples of this principle, as in the traditional belief that the ruler of a society, such as emperor or pharaoh, embodies the entire society, or the notion that a single event can encapsulate larger trends in a person's life. In essence, every act of divination invokes this principle, in holding that the moment of inquiry can capture the image of a broader field of concerns and life choices. It makes me think of those people too that think like medicine people who would, even if you still had a drop of the medicine that was in something before, it would still have full potency. It could just, it could be completely diluted, but it would still have full potency because all of the energy therein still existed. I think that's cool. Fractal geometry. Closely related in principle to the holograph, a fractal is a form which displays qualities of self-similarity in that the shape of the whole is repeated in octave fashion throughout all of its details. This principle can be seen, for instance, in the patterns of snowflakes, where the design of the whole repeats itself in decreasing size within the patterns along its edges. In fact, it is increasingly apparent that fractal-like features permeate all of nature, such as in the shorelines of large rivers, where the smaller inlets and tributaries branching off the main waterways mirror the meandering pattern of the entire river. The underlying principle of the fractal has been correlated with the traditional notions of condensation and vertical correspondence, as most succinctly expressed in the axiom, as above, so below. In the same way that a small detail of a fractal reflects the larger design, so esotericists have described the way that patterns in our lives repeat themselves at increasingly higher levels or octaves. This principle is found in the ancient idea of the microcosm, which holds that each person is a reflection in miniature of a larger universal order. Indeed, all symbols express this principle in their ability to imply subtler processes or meanings across higher levels of experience. And then morphic resonance. For centuries, scientists have puzzled over the way organisms acquire and develop their specific forms. To cite one aspect of this problem, if each cell in our body contains the same genetic instructions, how does one set of developing cells know it should become a leg, and another set an arm, and another an eyeball? Rupert Sheldrake's answer to such problems can be summarized in simple terms as follows. A root. Every form in nature is linked to other forms of its kind by means of a subtle web of relatedness, which Sheldrake calls a morphogenic field. This field operates not according to ordinary laws of causation, but through the process of similarity or resonance, extending through both space and time. Every new form thus derives guidance in its development from the accumulated experiences of its predecessors throughout history, as embedded within the archetypal field of that form. Thus, a specific species of bird will, in its growth and development, be influenced by the morphic field of that species, while at the same time contributing to that pool of stored patterns which will continue to influence all future members of that species. The same principle also holds true, Sheldrake theorizes, with modes of behavior and ideas. This view helps explain why scientists working independently often come up with identical theories or discoveries, or why today's children have an easier time learning to use computers than their parents did. For some, Sheldrake's model bears obvious resemblance to the esoteric theory of correspondences, which likewise holds that hidden connections unite similar forms or ideas across time and space. For the symbolist, all things are linked by secret chains of affinity on all levels of experience across both time and space. It should be noted, however, that despite widespread interest and even enthusiasm, the scientific evidence for Sheldrake's theory remains a matter of heated debate within the scientific community itself. Really? Heated? As we have noted, each of these scientific models recalls key elements of symbolist philosophy. Yet, as with Jung's synchronicity theory, there are limitations to such comparisons. There are limitations to such comparisons. First of all, it is important to note that in and of themselves, these ideas. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. So, first of all, it is important to note that in and of themselves, these ideas do not constitute proof of the symbolist worldview, which implies a multi-leveled cosmology that cannot be proved or disproved in concrete terms, nor do these theories verify the existence of the esoteric laws they most closely resemble. For example, a scientist might fully accept the role of fractal geometry within nature, as seen as the branching patterns of trees, rivers, or snowflakes, without accepting the varied ways this principle might operate in psychological or spiritual levels of existence. Indeed, to the extent that these modern models resemble their esoteric counterparts, they tend to do so in an essentially one-dimensional way. Recall our discussion in Chapter 1 of the distinction between the literal and metaphoric forms of symbolist laws, which illustrated the subtle and gross expressions of correspondence, contagion, and condensation. Generally speaking, modern scientific parallels resemble symbolist principles only in their gross or obvious form. For instance, Sheldrake's theory of morphogenic fields describes the way forms or ideas can be linked to related patterns by merit of formal or functional similarity. It is quite different from the esoteric claim that apparently dissimilar objects, such as fire, sex, the color red, passion, and rams, are related, and that each is governed by the astrological principle Mars. Thus, these objects or qualities share a connection less of surface form than of archetypal or metaphoric resonance. Sheldrake's theory does not exclude the possibility of such connection. Let's try that again. Sheldrake's theory does not exclude the possibility of such connections. It simply is not designed to address them, since they belong to an entirely different order of relatedness. Of the scientific theories mentioned, perhaps the most purely symbolic in nature is the fractal, with its geometric description of self-similarity upon increasing or decreasing levels of magnitude. A simple yet clear echo of condensation or vertical correspondence. Yet, as with our other examples, extending this area to other levels of consciousness is beyond the scope of scientific verification or even concern. To summarize, while each of the scientific theories offers an intriguing parallel to higher esoteric ideas, they are not identical in every respect, nor do they constitute conclusive evidence for them. Indeed, it is only in conjunction with the philosophical framework of symbolist philosophy that such physical models reveal their deepest implications as esoteric laws resonating across all levels of experience, from the gross physical plane to the level of pure mind. What can be said about them without hesitation is that these emerging scientific models represent developments more compatible with classic symbolist principles, and to that extent represent an important shift from the mechanistic models of pre-20th century science. I feel like I should pull up my Fractals app on my phone to show you. It's so cool. If I still have it after I had to upgrade, a lot of shit just disappeared. But I hadn't tried to. I wonder, will it be in games? Fractals. No. Is this a bust? Let's find out. Yep. Okay. Can't show you that. I have no idea what it's called. I thought it might pop out to me, but man, you just in and in and in and out and out and out, and the designs and the colors. It's so cool. Science and mysticism, allies or enemies? This discussion draws attention to the problem in the philosophical study of modern physics, whether science can support or confirm mystical truth. In recent years, this point has become a source of increasing debate, with one side claiming that modern science has in some sense vindicated ancient wisdom, and the other arguing that science and mysticism cannot be integrated without injustice to the aims and integrity of each. Huh. I never heard that argument. This question is worth exploring, as it sheds light on our ability as moderns steeped in the scientific worldview to adopt and use aspects of the ancient wisdom as set forth in this book. I don't know, I always felt like the science emerging just does explain in more depth the things that are already here. There's just like new ways to understand them. As we have noted, in recent years, a wide range of writers have looked to the new physics because it seems to offer helpful insights into the ideas of mystical thought. According to the perspective, the laws of forms of nature are seen as mirroring the experiences of higher states, so that, for example, holography images the mystical relationship between the part and whole. Critics of this view, however, have argued that this line of thinking mixes apples and oranges, whereas science concerns itself with the truths and facts of the physical world. Mysticism concerns a level of experience utterly beyond the realm of transitory forms and manifestation. Sounds like people with like their noses up in the air to me. For this reason, science cannot reveal anything important about higher truths. Interesting. Okay. As this position is sometimes expressed, we cannot hope to understand reality in its spiritual richness from the bottom up, by examining the properties of atoms or the laws of matter. While the higher levels of reality enfold and contain the lower levels do not enfold and contain the higher. I don't know. Like seeds and cells, they have all the info. But while it may be true that lower levels of reality do not contain the higher, there is ample precedent in the perennial traditions for the fact that they can, in certain respects, reflect them by means of symbolism, as above, so below. By the way of analogy, the printed symbols on a piece of sheet music for Bach's Mass in B minor do not contain the music or the higher aesthetic or spiritual experiences it evokes. Yet in some sense, these written notations accurately reflect the intricacies of Bach's musical statements and serve as useful guides toward evoking them. Moreover, even if we accept that the highest levels of spiritual experience lie beyond all forms and symbolic representation, this doesn't mean that physical plane forms cannot tell us a great deal about these levels of reality, just short of the absolute, and thus about the architecture and dynamics of the divine mind. Another point which critics have cited is the fact that scientific knowledge is in a state of constant flux and thus unreliable as a tool for understanding eternal spiritual truths. From age to age, humanity's knowledge of nature and her laws have given way to newer and seemingly more accurate theories, such that the solid and indestructible atom of one era gave way to the energetic and spacious atom of another, and to the uncertain quantum realities of the current model. If we base a spiritual philosophy on current day scientific knowledge, these critics argue, what happens to that spiritual truth when our scientific knowledge is modified or discarded? As particle physicist Jeremy Bernstein has remarked, quote, "If I were an Eastern mystic, the last thing in the world I would want would be a reconciliation with modern science, because to hitch a religious philosophy to a contemporary science is a sure route to its obsolescence," end quote. However, I believe there is a more moderate approach to this issue. While scientific truth is in general subject to change, certain aspects of empirical knowledge are demonstrably more timeless and fixed than others. Thus, although Aristotle's natural laws have not weathered the centuries well, the symbolically potent discovery in our own century of the relative nature of time is unlikely ever to be proven wholly wrong. Similarly, in the field of astronomy, theories concerning the evolution and origins of the universe are continually being updated, yet the discovery in 1846 of the planet Neptune will presumably never be revoked as a mistake. In geometry and mathematics, such fundamental ideas as the relationship of a circle's diameter um, to its circumference, or pi, or the mathematical properties of whole numbers, are probably eternal and universal in their application, and thus useful mirrors of higher principles. I believe the same will probably prove to hold true for the contemporary theories mentioned earlier. Each of these may indeed be modified in the years to come, yet will likely remain fixtures on our conceptual understanding of the way nature works. As Nick Herbert wrote concerning Bell's revolutionary contribution to physics, quote, "Physics theories are not eternal. When quantum theory joins the ranks of phlogiston, caloric, and the luminiferous ether in the physics junkyard, Bell's theorem will still be valid because it's based on facts. Bell's theorem is here to stay." Phlogiston. Phlogiston. Let's look it up. 555. It's 555 right now. Cool. Oh, cool. Sunday, 555. Mind, body, spirit change. Okay, where's that word? Phlogiston. Phlogiston? A substance supposed by 18th century chemists to exist in all combustible bodies and to be released in combustion.
Phlogiston. Phlogiston.
Phlogiston, a substance supposed by 18th century chemists to exist in all combustible bodies and to be released in combustion. Phlogiston.
Phlogiston.
Cool. Physics theories are not eternal. When quantum theory joins the ranks of phlogiston, caloric, and the luminiferous ether in the physics junkyard, Bell's theorem will still be valid because it's based on facts. Bell's theorem is here to stay. In some cases, too, scientific models are not actually overturned as much as reframed. For instance, Newtonian physics has in many ways been superseded by quantum physics, yet it is not entirely accurate to say that Newton's ideas have been proven wrong. Indeed, we would not have been able to fly to the moon without them. It would be more precise to say that Newton's laws were found to exist within a broader context, which now includes relativity theory, quantum physics, and non-locality, and chaos dynamics. I mean, okay. The same reframing is constantly occurring within spiritual thought. Astrology itself provides an excellent example. The relatively recent discoveries of Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, for example, have not overturned traditional models of planetary archetypal rulership so much as complexified them, giving contemporary astrologers new influences to work with in creating and interpreting charts. Finally, humanity's changing model of the world, even when shown to be wrong by subsequent generations, arguably retain a certain symbolic meaning relative to their own level of reference. As creative products of the collective imagination, overturned theories may still merit study as synchronistic keys to the collective mind, just as would any work of art, historic event, or sociological trend. Another and potentially more serious problem in the effort to merge science and mysticism centers around the inability of science to directly address matters of meaning. Science is the qualitative process confined to the study of measurable properties and phenomena. By contrast, the symbolist perspective is almost entirely qualitative or metaphoric in nature. To illustrate this distinction, consider the way each of these methods might approach a rose. The scientist might begin by examining the flower and noting its characteristics: the number and arrangement of petals, their relative size and color, the branching of leaves, thorns, and roots. Other relevant data might include the rose's genetic heritage, its internal cellular structure, its ideal soil condition, temperature, and water needs. Now contrast this with the way an esotericist or symbolist might examine the same rose. His or her first consideration might be aesthetic, the play of color between petals and stem, the design and proportion of each element, as well as the flower's size and placement relevant to other aspects of its environment. As a symbol, a rose's most commanding feature is its beauty. Thus, the rose evokes the energies of the heart and of the goddess Venus or Aphrodite manifest in plant form. At the subtlest archetypal level, plants in bloom express the principle of unfoldment, thus resonating with such ideas as growth, awakening, and the realization of latent potentials, corresponding to the yogic theory of the chakras, for which petaled flowers are frequently used as symbols. My chakra tattoos are really burnt right now. It's worth it. It was fun to swim with the babies and catch up. The symbolic approach of the esotericist can be termed hermeneutic, a term which refers to the art of symbolic interpretation. To the scientist, on the other hand, the symbolic properties of an entity tend to be ignored as relevant. Because of its emphasis on such factors as measurement and quantification, science seldom ventures into the dimension of meaning. What? That's why we do it. Yet the level of meaning is the most important one in symbolist thinking, for it is upon this level that one encounters such vital factors as subtle correspondences, archetypal symbolism, elemental properties, proportionalities, and other qualitative elements which comprise the symbolist intellectual universe. As important as these are, no scientific method or model is capable of capturing, in any definitive way, such elusive dimensions. This same problem underlies any argument that science might someday provide a full explanation for Jung's synchronistic phenomenon. Over the last several decades, a number of theorists, including Jung himself, have expressed optimism that the new physics may eventually unlock the deeper mechanism by which meaningful coincidences occur in our lives. As Robert Anton Wilson, a prominent writer in his field, expressed it, quote, Jung was on the right track. He kept insisting that somehow, somewhere in quantum theory, the actual mechanism of synchronicity would be found and defined. In the late 1980s, it begins to look as if we have started to understand it, end quote. Yet to the degree that we fail to let's try a sip. Yet to the degree that we fail to see the true heart or mechanism of synchronicity to be one of meaning rather than a causality, any such hope is misdirected. No strictly physical method can explain the subtle significance of a synchronistic event any more than it can measure the beauty of a flower or the meaning of a dream. Hence, even though scientists may be able to verify the way distant objects are linked across time and space, as does Bell's theorem, for instance, it cannot show us how the linkage occurs on subtler levels of meaning, nor can it ever provide us with the physical method of examining directly the archetypal qualities unfolding throughout our lives. For that, what is required is not another scientific model, but an entirely different worldview, a multi-leveled cosmology, with an understanding of reality beyond physical facts. Taken to its farthest extreme, however, the Hermeneutic Argument has led some to charge that since meaning doesn't easily lend itself to scientific examination, meaning is not only irrelevant but non-existent. What? For the most skeptical, any suggestion of inherent meaningfulness is regarded as the fanciful projection of human values onto an essentially neutral world. From this extreme vantage point, scientific models cannot be vehicles of higher meanings, for the simple reason that there are no higher meanings in the first place. Dude, that seems so ridiculous to me. But to each their own. However, on closer examination, this position does not hold up, right? It doesn't. First, the fact that science cannot directly examine meaning does not prove that meaning doesn't exist. As Carl Sagan has noted, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. More important, neither does it mean that the presence of meaning in the world is not subject to verification of any sort. As Ken Wilber has argued, if we dismiss mysticism or hermeneutics concerns for lack of concrete evidence, then we must summarily dismiss all non-empirical endeavors from ... And then this is like all code. Good morning, welcome. This is all italicized. ... Mathematics to literature to linguistics to psychoanalysis to historical interpretation. Nobody has ever seen out there in the sensory world the square root of a -1. That is a mathematical symbol seen only inwardly, privately, with the mind's eye. Yet a community of trained mathematicians know exactly what that symbol means, and they can share that symbol easily in intersubjective awareness, and they can confirm or reject the proper and consistent uses of that symbol, end quote. In the same way, One might argue that while the private and subjective models of reality entertained by symbolists may not lend themselves to verification along concrete scientific lines, they are nonetheless open to relative confirmation or rebuttal by experts conversant with the ideas and experiences of this philosophical perspective. On the personal level, yogis have long stressed that an individual's process of investigation should play a vital role in the student's acceptance or rejection of any important philosophical viewpoint. No externally derived model of reality, whether taught by a scientist, preacher, or astrologer, should be blindly accepted as true without first carefully examining it in a genuine scientific spirit to see whether it squares with one's own experience. Boom. You know? In this spirit, we each might observe the patterns of events in our own lives, putting aside all preconceived notions, and decide for ourselves if outer events do indeed reflect inner ones, or if subtle connections between separate events suggest themselves. Astrology offers an especially useful tool in this regard by providing a systematic way to monitor the symbolic patterns and interconnections arising throughout one's life. For example, one might compare the cycles and symbols predicted in one's horoscope with the events that actually transpire during a particular period of time. As one who has experimented with this discipline for over 20 years, I find it hard to imagine that anyone approaching such a study with an open mind would not be impressed by astrology's accuracy in mapping the archetypal and synchronistic patterns of personal life or the culture at large. Yet it may be possible to take this verification process one critical step further. For even if science cannot directly confirm the presence of meaning in our lives, it may be capable of indirectly validating its presence. To explain the distinction between direct and indirect validation, consider the following analogy. Imagine an astronomer discovering and photographing a new planet, which is then confirmed by other astronomers. This is an example of direct evidence. On the other hand, suppose the same astronomer notices subtle perturbances, perturbation, not perturbations. Oh no! Let's find out how to say it. Perturbations. Okay. Perturbation. Anxiety. Mental uneasiness. Perturbation. Okay. Cool. On the other hand, suppose the same astronomer notices subtle perturbations in the orbit of an already known planet, apparently caused by another planet beyond it, which is tugging on it gravitationally each time it passes by. This would be an example of indirect evidence, in which a claim is strongly suggested by the available facts, yet isn't proven conclusively. In this spirit, I would argue that the groundbreaking research of French statistician Michael Gauquelin provides us with compelling evidence for the existence of meaning in our world. As noted in Chapter 9, Gauquelin's work demonstrated statistically the correlations between certain planetary positions and the professional inclinations of men and women born under those placements. This aspect of his work proves, in a direct way, the relationship between the positions of planets and the lives of humans on Earth. But what it indirectly proves is something potentially more momentous: the rulership and correspondences traditionally associated with the planets by astrologers. Based upon years of research on the efforts of planetary influence on thousands of individuals, Gauquelin's work suggests that Saturn is indeed related to a predisposition for the physical sciences. Saturn showed up predominantly, for example, in the charts of eminent professors of medicine at the rate that exceeded odds of 10,000 to 1. No, wait. Dude, with the numbers and the commas. I don't know how to say how many this is. I just am going to show you. I don't know how to say that. Is it 10 million? Isn't that, I don't think that's enough zeros. But it's way more than 10,000. Where are you? Here it is. Do you guys know how to say that? Because I don't. Every time I've approached numbers in this book, I just feel confused. Or at least how to say them properly. Okay. Mars to martial and athletic involvements. Mars was prominent in the chart of athletes against the odd of 500,000 to 1. That one I think is 500,000. 500,000 to 1. And Jupiter to politicians. Just as would have been expressed based on traditional astrological theory. 10 million? Thank you. Thank you so much. Hey, DKs, welcome in. Doesn't seem like enough zeros for a million to me, but it seems like way too many for 1,000. I don't know. Okay. Why is this so important? Because Gauquelin's research clearly suggests that the planets hold qualities of meaning. After all, what physical force might conceivably connect Mars with a human predisposition for sports instead of, say, the arts? While it isn't inconceivable that researchers might eventually uncover a mechanical expression for these correlations, this would seem unlikely. In their implications for the prevailing scientific worldview, Gauquelin's conclusions are nothing short of revolutionary in that they strongly suggest an organizing principle beyond physical causality. Once we validate the essentially symbolic character of astrological correspondences, whether through personal experimentation or controlled tests like those of Gauquelin, the materialistic worldview comes crashing down like a house of cards, to use John Anthony West's apt metaphor. Shoot, I wonder. Okay, I'm starting to get nervous about getting ready for work. Toward reconciliation, science in a symbolist key. Seen as a whole, these ideas provide us with a foundation for revisioning the relationship between symbolist principles and scientific inquiry. In this context, the question of whether science proves the truth of esotericism becomes less important than understanding the ways science and symbolic thinking can usefully illumine, fully illumine one another. illumine, illumine one another. To use a simple analogy, a book containing the mystic verses of Rumi does not by itself constitute proof for the poet's higher spiritual realizations, yet this hardly means it cannot provide useful insights into spiritual matters. Yes, this hardly means it cannot provide useful insights to spiritual matters, once one accepts the premise that there are spiritual levels of awareness in the first place. Presuming a meaningful universe, the theories of science, Newton's, Bell's, Einstein's, likewise provide information concerning the higher truths of consciousness when seen anew in the light of symbolist perception. The scientific and symbolist approaches lead to contemporary types of knowledge. In the same way that adjusting a polarizing filter on a camera reveals different ranges of color and contrasts in the scene being viewed, So the quantitative method of science and the qualitative method of esotericism extract different orders of information from the world. Scientific inquiry may shed new light on matters of great interest to mystics and philosophers. In turn, the comprehensive vision of reality implied by the symbolist might be employed to infuse scientific inquiry with a dimension of meaning that evokes a richer and more complete understanding of the world. The end result of such cross fertilization might be more philosophically resonant. The end result of such cross fertilization might be a more philosophically resonant science and more objectively grounded spirituality. It's like the mix between Eastern and Western. So many numbers. Okay. Ironically, in historical times, this fusion of science and meaning was a common one, as scientists were generally philosophers, and philosophy was considered a branch of science. It's because it is. It started there. Pivotal figures in these disciplines, from ancient Greeks like Pythagoras and Plato, through the Renaissance theorists Galileo, Johannes Kepler, and Sir Isaac Newton, to the great German thinkers. Oh, I looked this up. I don't remember. Goethe and Hegel, Goethe and Hegel, Hegel, saw in nature's patterns a source of important insights into spiritual and psychological principles. As Galileo commented, quote, "Philosophy is written in a book which is ever before our eyes. I mean the universe. But we cannot understand it if we do not learn the language to grasp the symbols in which it is written." End quote. The modern Islamic scholar Said Hosen, I apologize, Seyyed, and then his last name Hossein, and then Nasser, capital Nasr, echoes the important contribution symbolist thinking can make to science. Quote, "The traditional sciences of all traditional civilizations are based on a hierarchic vision. Hierarchic? Balls. I don't know. Hierarchic. Hierarchic. No, I don't mean that. I mean exactly what I typed. Classified according to various criteria into successive levels or layers. Okay, but how do I say it?
Hierarchic.
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 Hierarchic. Okay. The traditional sciences of all traditional civilizations are based on a hierarchic vision of the universe, one which sees the physical world as the lowest domain of reality, which nevertheless reflects the highest states by means of symbols, which have remained an ever open gate toward the invisible. The psycho-principal world, which preoccupies modern science, is seen in the traditional perspective as a reflection of the luminous archetypes." End quote. Even some contemporary scientists have begun to realize the potentially important role meaning might play in understanding our world. It seems really funny to me that I just never thought that. Do you think there's a bunch of people out there that feel that way? Probably there are. The late physicist David Bohm theorized that meaning might represent the subtle organizing principle for both matter and energy. Meaning, he wrote, is a key factor of being, not only for human beings individually and socially, but perhaps also for nature and for the whole universe. He speculates that there may be cosmic meanings beyond any human individual or even the totality of humanity. Nobel Prize winner Richard Feynman, too, sees a new era coming for scientific inquiry. Quote, the next great era of awakening of human intellect may well produce a method of understanding the qualitative content of equations. Today, we cannot see whether Schrödinger's equation contains frogs, musical composers, or morality, or whether it does not. And so we can all hold strong opinions either way. End quote. 22. The reintroduction of meaning would have revolutionary implications for all scientific disciplines, from chemistry, astronomy, physics, and mathematics to soft sciences like psychology, anthropology, and medicine. With this reconciliation in mind, let us consider a specific example of the symbolist contribution within the field of astronomical exploration. As I hope to show, the symbolist view offers the possibility of new levels of meaning and information concerning the cosmos. Astrological exploration, a symbolist approach. I'm starting to get nervous. I don't know if I'm enjoying this right now. 6 pages left, which will take me right up to like 7 o'clock. In many ways, the merging of astronomy with symbolist values is not so much a new development as a contemporary revitalization of an approach that used to be a standard. Even Galileo, the father of modern science, suggested that Mars and Jupiter had decidedly masculine qualities, exactly as Chinese astrologers had declared millennia earlier. In studying any newly discovered planet or celestial body, we must broaden our scope. Instead of concerning ourselves only with such quantifiable factors as topography, chemical composition, or magnetic fields, the symbolist perspective would oblige us to ask, what does this planet or celestial body mean? I suggest, in fact, that we consider astronomical or scientific discoveries on 3 levels of significance: universal, collective, and personal. On the universal level, we might ask, what is the archetypal meaning of this discovery in itself, as a reflection of higher truth? At a collective level, the question becomes, what is the symbolic or synchronistic importance of this discovery for society at this time? Finally, on the personal level, each person might ask, what is the significance of the discovery for my life at this time? To illustrate, imagine the discovery or exploration of a new planet. We might first consider the significance of this body in terms of its universal symbolism or meaning. This could be determined through a variety of methods. On one level, the archetypal significance of a planet might be glimpsed through reflection on the name assigned to it by astronomers, a method based on the belief among astrologers that the names chosen for newly discovered celestial bodies are synchronistically appropriate to their meaning, whether recognized consciously by scientists or not. The most recently discovered planet in our solar system serves as a useful illustration of this idea. In ancient mythology, the god Pluto was ruler of the underworld. By correspondence, the planet Pluto has come to be associated with the psychological underworld and the dynamic forces of the subconscious mind. These include deep-seated emotions, the will to power, emotional transformation, and the processes of death and rebirth. Another aspect of meaning of a new planet is revealed by examining the historical events taking place at the time of its discovery to see what synchronistic insights these provide into this planet's archetypal energy. For example, the period surrounding the discovery of Pluto in 1930 witnessed a number of important historical developments, such as the rise of fascism, the discovery of atomic power, as well as the spread of the criminal underworld in America, all displaying features of the Plutonian archetype as it has come to be understood by astrologers. Next, on the collective level, the discovery or exploration of a new planet often holds profound meaning for society during that time. As shown above, planetary discoveries have been accompanied by dramatic cultural changes corresponding in marked ways with the symbolic meanings associated with the planet or its mythological namesake. Many astrologers take this to mean that the timing of such discoveries is not accidental but synchronistically connected to changes taking place in the collective psyche. We find examples of this not only in the area of planetary discovery, but in all aspects of space exploration. Consider the period surrounding the first moonwalk in 1969, if you feel like it. Oh, man. Thanks. I love you guys too. I'm feeling like I need to get my uniform on and shit. The late 1960s saw the rise not only of the women's movement, but of other elements of the collective feminine as well, as reflected in the exploration of the human unconscious via psychedelic drugs and the rise of Dionysian or emotionally unrestrained expressiveness in the arts. Within hours of the lunar landing itself, two other stories occurred with possible synchronistic links. Ted Kennedy's infamous Chappaquiddick incident, resulting in the drowning death of a young woman, water, women, and alcohol or liquid spirits all having lunar or feminine associations, and the discovery of Aphrodite's most important ancient temple by archaeologists Iris Love in present-day Turkey, the moon having been associated by the ancient Greeks with the worship of Aphrodite. If we read the moon mission as mirroring an opening to the feminine principle taking place within society at the time, then synchronicities like this may provide important insights into the specific state of our collective relationship with the archetypal feminine. Kennedy's scandal illuminated the darker underside of that connection and the discovery of Aphrodite's temple, accentuating its more aesthetic aspect and underscoring the moon's symbolic association with memory and the past. Finally, on the personal level, the synchronistic effects of any important discovery can be expected to manifest in different ways for individuals across the planet. An astrologer might determine this by examining the zodiacal degree inhabited by the celestial body at the moment of its discovery, then looking to see what part of an individual's personal horoscope this corresponds to. It may be further assumed that any significant correlations would be amplified many times over for those individuals actually involved in the discovery. It is curious, for example, that the name of the figure most responsible for Pluto's discovery, Percival Lowell, had initials closely matching those of the planet itself, and that the woman who uncovered Aphrodite's temple had the last name Love. In a similar vein, astrologers have often pointed out the important role of the moon in Neil Armstrong's horoscope, as if to suggest a vital connection between this energy and the personal life and the fact that he was the first human to set foot on this body in space. This symbolist-inspired approach can be applied to any area of scientific inquiry. Loosely appropriating the terminology of their traditional counterparts, we might envision the following set of conversions. Geology and geography, understood symbolically, would evoke the ancient art of geomancy, the study of the symbolic dynamics of environmental forms and energies. Infused with symbolic meaning, chemistry would revitalize alchemy, the study of matter's subtle energetic properties and qualities, and their psychic equivalents. Geometry, seen qualitatively, would feed into sacred geometry, the study of pure forms and their higher significance. Read symbolically, mathematics would enhance our understanding of numerology, the study of spiritual qualities of numerical patterns. Approaching the human mind symbolically and archetypally gives rise to sacred psychology, the understanding of human motivation in its cosmic dimension, as exemplified by yoga's chakra psychology, the Kabbalistic tree of life, and modern-day archetypal psychology associated with theorists like James James Hillman. Meaning-based health and diagnostic systems would give rise to sacred medicine, the study of the metaphoric and energetic dimensions of the body and mind, and the deeper significance of illnesses. And astronomy interpreted symbolically yields new insights to astrology, the study of the meanings and dynamics of celestial phenomena. In this same vein, the application of symbolist principles would permit modern research to gain a deeper insight into each of these traditional systems and their ideas, such as the Chinese medical belief that physical health requires a balance between female yin and male yang properties in the body. Astrology's belief in the symbolic dimension of celestial bodies, alchemy's emphasis on the elemental properties of moist, dry, cool, and hot, or sacred geometry's speculation on the higher meaning of visible shapes. More broadly, the symbolist perspective raises the philosophical question as to whether any purely scientific method can ever wholly explain nature's workings. In recent years, prominent scientists like astrophysicist Stephen Hawking have suggested that science may eventually answer all the great questions concerning nature's laws and functions. A sentiment strangely reminiscent of 19th century claims that only minor problems remained for scientists to solve before our knowledge of nature would be complete. The symbolist perspective suggests the inherent vanity of such claims. One can no more hope to obtain a complete understanding of the world without considering its qualitative dimension than to unlock the full importance of a rose using only scientific instruments or methods. Through the lens of metaphor and symbolism, scientists, and indeed all human beings, have access to a more complete picture of our world than is possible through a purely quantitative approach. Okay, we're going to freaking make it, dude. The ritual dimension of science. In addition to revealing a new horizon of knowledge in our understanding of the world, the infusion of science with symbolist perspective may have important practical ramifications. Earlier, we reflected on the possibility that our actions may have synchronistic or magical effects on the world, since all forms of activity engage subtle dynamics within the larger network of correspondences around and within us. Applying this idea to science, we might ask, what subtle influences do our collective actions relative to the natural world have beyond what is readily apparent? For instance, when human beings landed on the moon, why does he have to keep using this as an example? For instance, when human beings landed on the moon, we necessarily affected its environment in subtle and gross ways, changing its atmosphere, scattering assorted debris, and even planting a flag into its surface. What symbolic or geomantic effect might this have set into motion in connection with the lunar field of meaning? And how do those effects extend synchronistically to our own inner universe, the domain of our inner moon? Since the moon corresponds with our collective feminine nature, it is possible that our intrusions upon the lunar surface have subtly colored the quality of our emotional life in ways we can't yet comprehend. That's a question. Likewise, when we eventually capture and analyze an orbiting asteroid for its minerals, what subtle strands of the universal fabric are we affecting? If the asteroid holds an objective meaning and it's entwined with the life streams of all beings, what chords within the great symphony would be altered by our investigations? It is worth noting that since the earliest days of space exploration, elders from various indigenous cultures have cautioned scientists against insensitive or thoughtless tampering with the celestial environment, as exemplified by our careless littering of Earth's surroundings with defunct satellites and other hardware. Such concerns arrive from an awareness not only of the sacredness of nature, but the sensitivity to the unforeseen side effects these activities might set into motion. For instance, Hopi spokesperson Thomas Banayaka warned an audience in Los Angeles as the NASA mission returned from the moon that human tampering with the moon and stars could create an earthquake or a tidal wave. After delivering this prophecy, Baniaka left the area, saying that the dire consequences he predicted might come tomorrow. At 6 o'clock the next morning, the San Fernando earthquake rocked Los Angeles. Understandably, coincidences like this may not convince the hardened skeptic, but they should at least give us reason to reflect on the deeper significance of our actions, not only in space exploration, but everywhere else in nature. When a forest of old growth trees is leveled, or a species of animal hunted to extinction, what is the synchronistic impact of our carelessness on humankind's inner ecology? When we detonate nuclear devices beneath the Earth's surface, what repercussions are triggered in the subtle web of relatedness beyond what can be measured on scientific instruments? Taking symbolist ideas seriously would compel us to adopt new protocols regarding future scientific undertakings. This methodology would consider not only the sacredness of all life and environments, but the role of each species and locale in the greater field of interconnectedness. Scientists could benefit from a careful examination of the beliefs of Native Americans and other indigenous peoples who approach all undertakings in the spirit of humanity, in the spirit of humility and sacramental reverence. Rather than setting foot on a new planet in a spirit of dominance and exploitation, one might envision a time when explorers first seek to establish a spiritual communion with the new environment through ritual attunement and consecration. Those are 2 lines. Come on, where are you? Ritual actions would additionally serve to seed the initial moments of new endeavors with auspicious symbols, since the symbolist view holds that the harmonious beginning influences a successful outcome. That a harmonious beginning influences a successful outcome. To think in this way is to move beyond conventional ecological notions toward the perception that everything has a unique equality of meaning and subtle interconnection with all other things. As the mystical poet Francis Thompson wrote, "All things by a mortal power, near or far, hiddenly to each other linked are, that thou canst not stir a flower without the troubling of a star." I love that. Francis Thompson. The promise of symbolist thought. The symbolist perspective represents a radical shift in the way we think about the world. In this book, we have touched on a few of its implications. On the personal level, these include the discovery of the new dimensions of meaning in the events of our lives and the suggestion that life is a sacred text to be unlocked through the key of metaphoric knowing. Thus understood, life events yield information about our personality, our karma, and even our future potentials, pointing the way toward greater levels of awakening. Extended to the collective sphere, the symbolist perspective holds the promise of a new understanding of the universe through a science informed by qualities and values rather than concrete facts. It promises the fulfillment of a dream long held by esotericists, forging a grand science of correspondences by which to interpret and correlate phenomena. More fundamentally, symbolist thought suggests a radical revision of how we view knowledge itself. This expanded vision further asks us to question the ramifications of all actions relative to the world, both by individuals and by engineers and scientists. Yet the most far-reaching consequence of the symbolist legacy is also the simplest, the realization that the cosmos is suffused with meaning. Why is this so important? The prevailing scientific worldview tells us that life is a dynamic yet essentially meaningless affair. It holds that whatever symbolic significance it holds has been projected onto it by the human mind. To the symbolist, the world is a realm of magic and mystery, and the mindset of science cannot fully explain. The symbolist vision shakes the materialist conception of reality to its core and shows the manifest phenomena of this world to possess a ground of meaning beyond purely physical explanations. The holistic worldview, which some contemporary theorists have related to the new science and to Jung's synchronicity theory, moves in this direction, but does not succeed in overthrowing materialism. Jung himself backed off from the metaphysical implications of his theory. In his original work on the subject, he emphasized meaning as the defining mark of synchronistic events. If meaning is inherent in coincidences, a transcendental dimension beyond the material world seems unavoidable. Yet, as Anelia Jaffe points out in The Myth of Meaning, in his later writings, Jung shifted his emphasis from the idea of meaning as the dominant characteristic of synchronistic phenomena to the more objective concept of acausal connectedness, a decidedly less radical position from the academic perspective. This shift of emphasis ultimately led Jung to conclude that the explanation for synchronicity lay not in philosophy or mysticism, but in empirical science. In the final analysis, the deeper message of symbolist thought is that the world is a rich and multidimensional place in which, as Plotinus said many centuries ago, all teems with symbol. Until we acknowledge life's qualitative dimensions, we are like flies crawling across the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, ignoring the archetypal drama unfolding around us. Wow, what a sentence. Like proponents of an old-time religion who insist on reading biblical stories as literal truth, ignoring their metaphoric and mystical possibilities, we are too often experiential fundamentalists, blind to the depths of meaning presented to us every day. The symbolist perspective offers the possibility of a transformed vision, restoring lost dimensions of significance to our lives. Having regained this insight, we can revision our personal dramas in an archetypal context. Toward this end, this book has suggested the value of re-examining the philosophical and symbolic systems of antiquity, in which we glimpse a deeper truth about the universe and our place in it. This is not simply to champion a return to the golden age of the past, in which esoteric knowledge supposedly flourished in pristine form. On the contrary, we today find ourselves at an especially privileged vantage point in our study of symbolist ideas because of our unprecedented access to the esoteric systems and teachings of many historical cultures. In this spirit, what has been presented here is intended not as a scholarly survey so much as a tapestry of the themes of the symbolist legacy, modified for our own time and sensibilities. Perhaps the deeper study of symbolism and synchronicity in our lives is best seen as part of an emerging sacred science, incorporating insights from both ancient and contemporary sources. This integrative approach would draw upon knowledge from such traditional disciplines as sacred geometry, astrology, mathematics, yogic chakra psychology, mythology, geomancy, and ritual theory, as well as the findings of modern science and psychology. Hey, Mama. These approaches would, in turn, be framed by the insights into consciousness presented by the world's great mystical and meditative traditions. Seen in this way, the message of meaningful coincidence would assume its rightful place as a facet of a greater framework of perennial philosophical and spiritual thought. It is my hope that this book has contributed towards this end. The end. We did it! I tried to speed read as fast as I could through that last bit because I got to get my body ready for work so I can make the big bucks today. Oh, dang. Yeah. Look at I went swimming yesterday and I got so much sun. I'm so burnt. I'm going to be sweating balls at work today, but it's worth it. Oh my gosh. Oh, son of a gun. All right, you guys. Thank you so much. I don't know. I might go live and finish another book out today. I might not. I might start another book. We'll see what shakes. I love yous. I wish you wonderful Sundays. And I know I'll see you sooner than later, but I got to go get my body ready. So thank you so much. Mwah. I'll see you soon. That was that book. And thank you, Ray Grasse. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you all very soon. Laters.